Daryl Dixon. The Blunt Force Report. Daryl grew up in the mountains of northern Georgia alongside his older brother Merle, under the roof of their neglectful redneck parents, their father, an abusive alcoholic alongside their chain smoker mother. Merle was the only inspirational figure he had during his youth and thus inherited his backward views on society. However, due to his older brother's service in juvenile detentions, he became frequently absent from Daryl's life and thus he was reluctantly forced to fend for himself, upon where he developed a hard-boiled survivalist mindset. At a young age, the brothers lost their mother in a house fire which had been caused by a cigarette while she was asleep or presumably drunk. Some point after this event, Daryl found himself lost in the woods for 9 days, during where he was forced to consume wild berries and utilize poison oak as a substitute for toilet paper. Eventually, he managed to find his way back home. Upon arrival, however, he discovered that his father had not noticed his absence and thus Daryl simply walked through the back door and made himself a sandwich. Over the course of several years, the brothers were mentally and physically abused by their father, which eventually caused Merle to abandon the family and join the military, subsequently leaving Daryl in the process, which resulted in severe scars located on his back. This abuse, however, was unknown to Merle. Following their father's death, Daryl moved out from his birth home and eventually reconnected with Merle and thus simply followed his brother's lead, upon where they entered into a drifter lifestyle, where the pair utilized their survival instincts, upon where Daryl grew into a proficient hunter and tracker, hunting for food and dealing in contraband. At one point, the pair resided in Merle's drug supplier's house where the trio watched TV and by noon had become intoxicated. A discussion turned violent where the dealer punched his older brother, where Daryl retaliated by savagely beating the man. However, the dealer then threatened to shoot Daryl. A large argument ensued, which ended with the dealer punching Daryl in the gut, causing him to vomit. Merle and the dealer laughed the incident off. Following this near-death experience, Daryl came to view himself as an unimportant individual who held no value or purpose in life. During the onset of the outbreak, Daryl and Merle traveled towards a supposedly safe zone in Atlanta. Sometime after the city was napalmed by the military, they met up with Shane's group and they formed a campsite outside the outskirts of Atlanta, along with other survivors. During their stay at the camp, the brothers spent a considerable amount of time hunting animals for the group. Daryl is both physically and mentally strong. He is often surly and very resourceful, but his compassion and loyalty towards the people he cares about are second to none. Despite his hardened personality, he is not without a softer, more emotional side. He is often volatile, but still significantly more level-headed than his older brother, Merle Dixon. Usually distant, Daryl is often shown to be caring and selfless under extreme circumstances. Without being asked, he attempts to find the lost Sophia Pelletier on multiple occasions, one of which nearly cost him his life. He also takes the initiative to go back to find Andrea when she gets separated from the group. In Season 1, Daryl is portrayed as a Southern specialist tracker who constantly lives in the shadow of his older brother, Merle. Despite his hostility and distant behavior, he is a member of the team for a multitude of reasons, some of which being his hunting and tracking skills, his creativity in dealing with walkers, and his uncanny knack for surviving some of the worst possible conditions. In Season 2, Daryl becomes more complacent and cooperative within the group, showing signs of respect and affection to the members he's growing closer to through mutual respect. He also begins to develop a special bond with fellow survivor Carol, helping her find her lost daughter, Sophia. Daryl begins to realize his older brother's way isn't the only way to do things, taking on more responsibility for his actions and the group itself. Having been an outsider for most of his life, he is now starting to become a loyal member of the increasingly closely bound team. However, after Sophia's death, he reverts to his original hostility and becomes emotionally detached from the group. With the help of Carol and the rest of the group, he is involved in some issues, helping Rick and Shane handle Randall and seems to care about the farm and his shelter. On the night the farm is destroyed, he escapes with Carol and while she tries to persuade him to leave with her, Daryl, with a sense of respect for Rick, seems to be committed to keep the group safe. In Season 3, Daryl proves to be invaluable, helping Rick and the rest of the group to clear the prison from the walkers so they can turn it into their new home. Moreover, he helps defend the prison after Rick's psychological collapse due to Laurie's death, takes care of Judith, and also demonstrates his leadership capabilities by keeping the team united. The group has now become a large family, for which he is willing to kill or die for. Not surprisingly, when he learns that Glenn and Maggie are detained by the governor at Woodbury, Daryl is one of the first members of the group to voluntarily go with Rick and penetrate the town to get their people back. However, Daryl ends up imprisoned there and after many hardships manages to escape with his brother, Merle. Daryl is then forced to choose between his old family and his new family. He finally decides to go with his brother. Daryl and Merle meet a family that is threatened by walkers. Daryl shows his altruistic mentality, leaping in to save them while Merle ignores them and then tries to plunder their car. However, Daryl prevents him, deciding to leave his brother behind and return to the prison. Merle then decides to follow him as he has nowhere to go. Merle eventually sacrifices himself while trying to kill the governor. Daryl later finds that Merle has turned, and for the first time Daryl shows his conflicting feelings. He is understandably devastated by his brother's death, yet he unleashes frustration and anger he's felt for his brother since childhood on Merle's body. In Season 4, his role in the group is even more important. He has become a member of the prison council, being responsible for the prison administration and is also one of the key members of the group. However, the security of the prison does not last long, as the governor leads a new team that manages to eventually destroy the team's shelter. After the governor's assault, Daryl and Beth are separated from the others, and Daryl firmly believes that they all died during the assault. He feels guilty about not being able to protect Rick, Herschel, and the rest of the group. However, everything changes when Daryl meets Rick, Michonne, and Carl once again just before they all head to Terminus. Rick's relationship with Daryl has become so strong that Rick considers him a brother. In Season 5, the group is trapped in Terminus. They all face great risk, but an explosion gives them the opportunity to escape. Thanks to Carol, the group is able to reunite. During the 5th season, Daryl and Carol's bond gets stronger, having been separated from each other for a long time. However, Daryl hasn't forgotten what happened to Beth. At the same time, the group meets a new survivor, Father Gabriel. At one point, Daryl sees the car he had seen the night Beth was lost and follows it with Carol. In their effort to find Beth, they meet Noah, who informs the pair that there are people kept as hostages and Beth, who had helped him escape, was one of them. Throughout the previous seasons, Daryl has begun to mature. He prevents Carol from killing Noah, saying, "He's just a kid." Later in the season, the group who captured Beth captures Carol as well after being hit by one of the hospital's scavenging cars. Daryl returns to Father Gabriel's church with his main motivation being revenge. The whole group is preparing to get back its members. Unfortunately, only Carol manages to come back as Beth ends up with a bullet on her head. Daryl responds with swift vengeance on Dawn Lerner. After a long search for a shelter, the group finds a barn and temporarily stays there, but a new and seemingly suspicious survivor named Aaron approaches them and suggests they follow him. After a lot of discussion, they finally join Aaron and end up in Alexandria. At first, Daryl cannot adapt to Alexandria's life and is isolated. However, soon, due to his hunting and tracking skills, he is offered to be Alexandria's new recruiter along with Aaron. In Season 6, he uses a newly acquired RPG to destroy a group of saviors, saving Abraham and Sasha. During a supply scavenging run, they meet up with Jesus, a survivor from another camp called the Hilltop Colony, which is run by Gregory. In order to open up talks of trading between the Hilltop and Alexandria, Rick and the group agree to attack the saviors to ensure the safety of the Hilltop. The group sets out to attack what turns out to be just one outpost of many. Though they win that particular battle, it starts a full-out war with the remaining saviors and their leader, Negan. Later in the season, Daryl ends up injured and hostage to Dwight. The events of the 6th season culminate in the last episode, wherein the group is circumvented in getting Maggie to Hilltop for medical attention for a sudden complication with her pregnancy. The season finale is left open as to who is on the receiving end of Negan's punishment. In Season 7, after the deaths of Abraham and Glenn, Daryl is seen for the first time truly broken. Alexandria ends up working for Negan, and for the first half of the 7th season, Daryl is imprisoned in the sanctuary. Through the hardships and psychological torture, Daryl still manages to maintain his sanity. With the help of Dwight's wife Shelley, Daryl escapes the daily torture at the sanctuary, and after killing a savior named Fat Joey, is reunited with his group at Hilltop. The group's mission becomes recruitment of other communities to help add numbers to their fight against the saviors. Hilltop and Alexandria commit fully to the war, however the Kingdom, the Scavengers and Seaside are both wary to join them. At the sanctuary, Dwight's allegiance shifts now that his wife has escaped. Dwight arrives at Alexandria with an offer of intelligence on the saviors and his help in defeating them. Still upset at Dwight for killing Denise, he slams him against the wall, but Dwight insists he's on their side and offers to work with them, saying his only reason left for staying with the saviors, Sherry, is now gone. He begrudgingly stands down. In Season 8, Daryl is the key character for the success of the plan to trap the saviors inside the sanctuary. Daryl, along with Rick, separate from the rest in order to get some weapons from a savior outpost. However, it soon becomes clear that Daryl, seething over Glenn's death and the torture he suffered at the hands of the saviors while imprisoned by them, is determined to kill them all, not caring what their reason for following Negan's orders may be. This is shown when he kills Morales despite their history prior to his joining the saviors, stating that the history in question no longer matters, murders an unarmed Todd despite the fact that Todd was just a worker and that Rick had just promised Todd they would spare him if he gave them the information he'd agreed to give them, and drives a bus through the sanctuary wall in a determined attempt to allow walkers they'd lured to the sanctuary to get in and kill everyone inside, so blind with hate that he was unconcerned that many of the people the walkers subsequently killed were innocent prisoners and workers. Upon Carl's death, he reminds the teenager that he saved the entire Alexandria community with his actions. Still stunned from Carl's death, Daryl and the group reluctantly decide to trust Dwight, but he still says that he will kill him when the war is over. Finally, Daryl participates in the final battle against the saviors. Then, he leads Dwight into a forest, where Dwight waits to be killed. However, Daryl, finally accepting that Dwight had been forced to follow Negan's orders against his will, drives him away and encourages him to look for his wife Sherry, warning that he will kill him if he returns. In Season 9, 18 months after the victory of the communities against the saviors, Daryl has become the leader of the sanctuary, which seems to not entirely please him. Indeed, he expresses to Rick his desire to do what he is good at, being out there, but Rick doesn't agree. The relationship between the two men is not at its best, as they have different beliefs, and it seems clear when Daryl is eager to help Maggie, who wants to kill Negan, contrary to Rick's belief. Later, Daryl tries to prevent Rick from stopping Maggie. They have a brief fight, but in the end, they reconcile. Then, when a horde of walkers is preparing to attack the communities, Daryl and Rick split up with the latter presumably dead. After a 6-year time jump, everything has changed and Daryl now lives alone with a dog. Daryl later assists Jesus and Aaron in looking for a missing Eugene. In their effort to find him, they notice that something strange is going on with the horde of walkers. When they finally find Eugene, they are confronted by the Whisperers. In Omega, Daryl shows a knowledge of how abusive parents work and sympathy for Lydia when he realizes that the girl has been abused. Upon confronting Daryl, Henry realizes that Daryl himself is likely a victim of abuse, explaining his knowledge and sympathies. Henry tells Daryl that sometimes you act like the kind of guy that slams people against walls, but I don't think that's it, implying that Daryl was the one who was abused rather than being an abuser. Henry suggests that Daryl's perspective could help to show Lydia that Daryl could be the one person to show Lydia that there's nothing to be afraid of, with Daryl suggesting that Henry could as well. In Season 10, Daryl continues helping to lead the fight against the Whisperers as well as struggling to act as a father figure towards Lydia. Despite his bad past with Negan, Daryl comes to his defense and even votes not to kill him, trusting the word of both Negan and Lydia about what had actually happened during the altercation with Margot, Gage and Alfred. However, Daryl becomes filled with rage when Magna and Connie, whom Daryl had developed a close friendship bordering on possibly romantic, disappear after the collapse of Alpha's cave. With Carol's reckless actions having caused it, this develops a rift between the two formerly close friends and Daryl recklessly attacks Alpha, nearly getting himself killed in the process. Following the end of the war and the defeat of the Whisperers, Daryl remains distant and bitter towards Carol, particularly after returning to Leah's cabin and finding Leah to be still missing. In Season 11, Daryl has lost some of his bitter rage and willingly works with Negan during the mission to take down the Reapers. Daryl's surprise reunion with Leah allows him to infiltrate the group, with Daryl trying to both take them down and protect both his former lover and his adopted family, something that Daryl and Leah share in common. Although the mission ends with Leah being forced on the run, Daryl is finally reunited with Connie, which softens his attitude once more. With both Rick and Michonne gone, Daryl takes up the role of parent towards Judith and RJ, something that he struggles with at times, although Daryl makes for a good father overall. Daryl also seems to have mended his relationship with Carol after Connie's return and moving to the Commonwealth, the two even planning to have lunch together at one point. Working as a soldier in the Commonwealth Army, Daryl maintains his loyalty to his friends and family, even threatening Lance Hornsby at gunpoint when he steps out of line. Commonwealth General Michael Mercer, who has to deal with corruption in his forces, is shown to have a great deal of respect and trust in Daryl despite them having a short relationship. During this period, while Daryl wears his armor often, he also discards it in situations where he's around his friends, such as the standoff at the hilltop and working with Gabriel and Aaron despite them being with a number of other Commonwealth soldiers. When Leah resurfaces, Daryl kills his former lover to protect Maggie and tells her that he feels he owes it to Glenn to protect her in the stead of Daryl's deceased friend. When the Coalition and the Commonwealth go their separate ways, Daryl argues with Judith, who wants to stay and help, revealing in the process that Daryl does too, but to him, keeping Judith and RJ safe is more important, which means taking them and leaving instead of staying. However, while Daryl is protective over them, he is not overprotective, allowing Judith to join him in putting down a small herd of walkers that are attacking and killing innocent people. When the Coalition and the Commonwealth go their separate ways, Daryl argues with Judith, who wants to stay and help, revealing in the process that Daryl does too, but to him, keeping Judith and RJ safe is more important, which means taking them and leaving instead of staying. However, while Daryl is protective over them, he is not overprotective, allowing Judith to join him in putting down a small herd of walkers that are attacking and killing innocent people. Unfortunately, there is no 12th season of The Walking Dead as the series has run its course. A few spin-off shows are however in the works and some are already airing at this time, but that is going to be another video altogether. Make sure to like and subscribe if you would like to see more videos like this one. Until next time, this has been another Blunt Force Report.